So we are finally here. We are here in Dharamshala. I'm here with a European and an American, right? And here right now in India. And it's been great in your company over the last like 20 days as a part of this co-living adventure. And I thought it's actually very valuable for people out there to understand how, founders these days are building products. So excited for this conversation. Um, we're going to keep it like more of a dialogue where all of us can ask questions and just bring our curiosity out. So let me start with a quick intro about Rahul. Rahul has worked in Europe for like a long time and has been able to build like VC-backed companies, has sold companies, VC-backed companies, and has been living in Dharamshala for the last 1 year and just like exploring his creativity and just learning new things. So we're excited for you sharing some of those lessons. Do you want to add anything to that, Rahul?
No, I'm glad to be here on this podcast. And yeah, like across time, I've built companies in tech. Across 10 years, I've built two companies with like massive teams. But right now, like exploring this world of solopreneurship and figuring out how to build products alone.
Very cool. So you are like one of those people who are like, as a solo person, I want to build $1 billion company. And I feel like I'm very excited to go into this topic in depth. Let's go to Adi, and Adi is like, visiting India. He was born in India, so I don't know. I should say you're visiting. You're back to your birth, back to your roots, back to your birthplace. Let me give a quick background about like you have been in the Bay Area for like 5-7 years, worked in tech companies like TikTok. Just give us like a little bit of your journey.
Yeah, so basically from the beginning, I've always wanted to work at like big companies in the Bay Area. That was my dream, live in SF. And once I achieved that, I realized it wasn't all that, and then I wanted more. So then I started exploring, and then I found this amazing community, and yeah, happy to be here.
Very, very cool. So we're gonna keep this more of a conversation. So let's start with you, Rahul. Tell us like about the last 10, 12 years, starting with like going to college back in India and then moving to Europe. And a lot of people when they once they go to Europe or outside India, their dream is like, okay, I want to settle down there. But your journey is a little different. You ended up coming back to India and you've been here for a year. So just like maybe walk us through a little bit about like your undergrad and where did you go and what did you learn and how did you get to this point?
Sure. I went to engineering school here in India. I went to BITS Pilani, did electronics engineering. But back then, this is 2007, I was not really interested in engineering. I guess like the classical Indian parents who say you should study engineering, doctor, or become a lawyer. And I did that. And I entered a great school,
Yeah.
but never really got into the studies. So I sort of like went into college politics, did a lot of like extracurricular activities, sports, music, but no studies. Right? I was not interested in engineering at all. So I decided like to follow my dad's footsteps. I thought that my dad is a banker, and I sort of thought, okay, I'll go to London or New York to become an investment banker. And I after that decided to go to London Business School in the UK, did my masters in management, and ended private equity. And it was a dream come true at that point of time in 2011. This is just after the financial crisis. The world was reeling out of it. And I entered that world. And 2 years, I really had a gala time, enjoyed it a lot, was working on billion-dollar deals. As a 21-year-old, when you're like transacting $8 billion or $9 billion in one go, like just the amount of zeros in the bank, it just blows up your mind.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, once I'd done the whole banking stuff, like I realized this is not for me. And I
So how, like, I mean, there are a lot of people, I mean, after their undergrad end up going in, let's say, consulting or investment banking.
Yeah.
But I mean, you moved there's like an interesting transition here where you moved from investment banking to more of like a product role or builder stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why do you feel like, what made you like, hey, like, no, investment banking is not for me. I want to do like building. Like, what was that journey and what made
So I think for me, like I never wanted to be a builder. So I never thought of entrepreneurship as a way of life. It was almost like I got so frustrated with finance that I was just moving numbers that I basically quit my finance job on a whim. And I was like, I'm done with this. I can't like wake up to 3 a.m. every morning. I'm not going to do this. And I took a break. And it was on this break, like it was a 6 to 9 month break where I was just living in my flat, being paid my non-compete from the job I had been. So I started cooking. Like as an Indian male, I should not say this, but sort of like as an Indian male, I'd never really done any cooking.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So I
That's part of the culture. Like, in India, it's like either your mom is cooking or you have like, some kind of support from the community, whether you have, if you're like middle.
which I think should change, because I think cooking is the best. It's one of the best meditations I have found for myself.
Yeah.
And it was in this period when I had nothing to do, where I had lived my dream of being a banker, and I didn't know what was next in my life. So I said, okay, I'll focus on my health and I'll start cooking. So I go to the supermarket, buy a tomato, buy an onion, buy a few lentils, and then come back home, look at a YouTube video, and cook. And while I was cooking, what started happening was I started inviting friends to my place. And like they would come and they'd be like, wow, Rahul, this is so great, right? And that feeling of like taking some raw ingredients, putting into like a pan and cooking and giving it to people, like started making me feel that this is such a great experience. Like you can take something out of it, you can take an imagination, build something, and give it to people, and how happy people are feeling. And that, I think, that small insight, like from cooking, which is kind of the least.
I don't think I would expect someone, an investment banker, to actually move to a builder mindset by cooking.
But cooking,
I don't think
it was the most surprising thing, because like I would call my mom up and I was like, Mom, I'm enjoying cooking so much. This is the best. I think I'm gonna become a chef. And she was like, oh my God, this guy, like, first year engineer, then went to business school, then became a banker, and now he wants to become a chef. And I'm like, okay, fine, like start a restaurant or something. And I think that sparked that sort of like entrepreneurship back into me. And also, like, it's funny because my dad has been a banker, but had his own business all this while. And I was actually the first person in my family who had got into a job, right? So across family, across generations, everybody had been into business, but I never really thought that was a thing. But like, I think the ancestral generational stuff comes out, and you realize that sort of it's the same feelings. You want to be your own boss. You want to use your own imagination. You want to use your own creativity. Give a piece of your creativity to other people. And that kind of insight, I started talking to friends. I was like, what can I do? I initially thought I'll go and study architecture school. I thought I'll open a restaurant. So I thought of different streams in which I could sort of like explore my creativity.
So let me ask you this: like, when you are in Europe, you are an immigrant, and the journey of like, it's easier to get a job and have a visa and everything. And now you're like getting into this builder mindset, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate into a startup and all, right? So what was that journey like? How did you figure out the visa and everything to be able to convince yourself? How was that part?
I think like somehow my brain is a bit sort of like wacky. Like it doesn't think of constraints. So whenever I think of like problems in life, I'm just like, okay, I decide a direction, and then I just decide that I'm going to go there, and then everything has to fall into place for that.
Yes.
So when I was thinking about that, I want to become an entrepreneur, I was never really thinking about visa as the thing. But like but I decided that I want to become an entrepreneur. And then slowly things I started figuring out different pathways to get the visa sorted out. But it's a funny thing because back then UK didn't have a sort of like extraordinary talent visa or an entrepreneur visa back then. And it was a very funny thing that I basically joined one of my friend's startups as a co-founder to start my own company. It's a very weird story how we ended up sort of like building, like getting my visa for the.
So how much money did you raise for your first company when you started building it out?
So for the first company, like, see, I was 23 years old back then, right? Like I had no experience like in building companies, and I was an immigrant in London, and I had no network, like except the business school network. So it was very hard to raise money. Like in 2013, London tech scene didn't exist, right? Like we didn't have like the tech system has evolved a lot in the last 10 years in London. So back then there were no like great venture capital funds over there. There were no like proper systematic investments happening. So for the first 1 year, it was me and my co-founder. We just had around like 15,000 pounds of savings each from our jobs. We just put that into the business. And for 1 year, that was like basically our food, our rent, everything like of the business was just 30,000 pounds we used to run the business. But after 1 year of sort of like hustling, so we would basically drive a van. So actually, before my first business was an Uber for laundry. So you would press a button and we would come to your house, pick up your laundry, get it dry cleaned within 24 hours. And that was the first business. So the biggest expense in London is basically, like as you can guess, is drivers, cars, like that kind of stuff is very expensive. So me and my co-founder decided that we are going to become the drivers. So we basically rented a car, and both of us would like first shift. My co-founder would be driving, and I would be on my computer coding. And then the second shift, like we would just exchange seats. So it was like a mini office inside a car. We would exchange roles because we are both colleagues from college. We went to college together. We went to business school together. So we are practically like
Very
brothers from different mothers, kind of situation.
So okay, so I'm trying to understand. You're saying so you had a place to stay. Along with that, you had a van, and you were working in.
So we had a place to stay. Yes, it was a very sort of like not the proudest sort of like places where we were staying. We actually got robbed. Like there was a burglary in the house. So it was that kind of like housing situation which we were living in. But we didn't have much at that time. You know, like we were living in a small flat. We lost our stuff, which was fine. We couldn't. But then, like, I'm just trying to give you an imagination of what kind of like living situation we were in back then, and we would just eat one meal a day. So even though it was a big drastic change because we were both working in Mayfair in London in the topmost finance jobs, and suddenly we decided to become an entrepreneur, and we were on the complete opposite spectrum of life in terms of like what was around us and what was the living situation we were in. But somehow the excitement of entrepreneurship, the excitement of building something, the excitement of building a company was so high that all those things didn't really matter to us back in that day.
So, so cooking motivated you to become a builder, and then you started bootstrapping your company with your own money that you made out of investment banking. And then you moved, and then you sold this company.
Yeah, it was a fascinating journey. Like almost like it was a 3.5 year journey. So the first year we were very like poorish. Like we were like picking up delivering laundry ourselves, like going for jogging in the morning and putting flyers into neighborhoods in London. And then after 1 year, we got an investment of around $500,000. And then sort of like we hired a bunch of people. We took the company to around $1.5 million in revenue. And once the company sort of scaled up and we had like few vans rolling around in London, few drivers rolling around in London, few dry cleaning partners with us. Like the next question was, like as you can imagine, in an operational business like this in London, like it's a very expensive. So we were not making profit, right? We were kind of break even. So we had revenue, we had costs, but we were not making money. And the reason was that some money was going to the drivers, some money was going to the dry cleaner, and then we would not be left with money. So the only way we could make money was to vertically integrate. And that meant we have to set up our own dry cleaning facilities. Now, me and my co-founder, with our background, we were like, oh my God, like, this is such a capital-intensive project.
Correct.
We'll have to go to the bank. We actually went to the bank, started talking about loans. And as we were doing the process, we realized, like, this is too crazy. Like, like two immigrant boys, 25 years old, sitting in London with no visas. We're thinking of setting up a capital-intensive, massive factory unit in London. So that kind of like sounded so bonkers that both me and my co-founder were convinced that that's not the right playbook for us. And given that sort of fact that tech was rising, software was like in London, like software was the thing being talked about, we said, okay, maybe we don't want to do this. And somehow during that time, as sort of like fate would have it, we got a good acquisition offer, and there was a way out.
So two immigrant boys moved to London, end up selling their company, first startup. Then what happened next?
I think it was a very strange moment, like suddenly, like you're working 18 hours every day, and suddenly you have no company, right? Like you've signed off your company to another person, so you have no team, no company, no phone calls, no customer service every morning, and you wake up and you're like, what happened? Like you have some money in the bank, like there are some few zeros more in the bank account, but you have no like the daily
sense of purpose.
The sense of purpose, the daily ritual is all gone, right? And obviously, you don't need to do a job, like exactly just after that moment. So you have the money to just like chill.
Yeah.
But like as a workaholic person, it was just very weird. Like you're basically built a baby and given it to someone else.
Yeah.
You see the van with your logo running around London, right? And then you're like, well, this is not my company anymore.
Yes.
Right? And I would be using my own dry cleaning service because I was very used to like getting my laundry done now from my own company. So the driver would come to my house to pick up laundry, and I'd be like, it was a very strange feeling that it's something your own, but not your own anymore. So as much as there was a happy moment about acquisition, but at the same time there was a sense of loss in the heart that sort of like something has gone away. And it took me almost 6 to 9 months to actually recover from that sense of loss emotionally. That I need to let that go and start focusing my energy on something new.
So how did you recover from that?
How did I recover?
Yes.
Traveling. I think like my personality is a bit of an extreme. So while I was building, while I was in banking, I didn't used to travel a lot. Like I was like work, party in London. Like that would be my schedule. And when I was building the company, we had not much money. So our lifestyle was a very much constraint. So suddenly when you have money and you're living in Europe and you're single, So the first thing that comes up, well, let's go to different cities and like explore Europe. So what I did was like I would like go to a city, like live there for a few weeks, and just like not go to sightsee, but just like enjoy the beach in Nice, right? And sort of like go for a coffee. Exactly what I'm doing till today, even after 10 years, right? Like of that moment, I'm sitting in Dharamshala, I have the exact same schedule. Like wake up, go to the mountains, go for a coffee, have a nice breakfast. I think that sort of like calms me down. And when I'm calmed, when I'm calmed down, like the emotional drama kind of goes away. And you can see life from a new perspective, and creativity flows back in.
So now, help me understand. You went through this journey,
Yeah.
and then you ended up creating a company, which is like a VC-backed company.
The next company,
Yeah.
it was not that director route. So yeah, like so this is 2016, and we just sold the company. So me and my co-founder, first of all, me and my co-founder had a fight, right?
Okay.
We had a fight, right? Because so obviously when it was our first company. We were the bestest of friends. We were flatmates,
Yeah.
right? So we basically just like after the acquisition happened, like because of the emotional drama, like of the acquisition, we both of us fought like we were like, should we have sold it? Should we not sold it? Was it the best decision? Did we mess up our life, etc., etc.? And we fought. So we didn't speak. We were living in the same damn flat, and we didn't speak to each other for 6 months. Right? So we were traveling. We were both traveling. We were traveling
Different places.
different places, yeah, and we would not like intersect. But it was very strange. He was my best. He's still my best friend.
Yeah.
So there was a whole sort of like this situation happening, and like we had decided, like I and also him had decided that we're going to focus on building software companies from now on.
Yeah.
But when we would think about it, we were like, do we? It was exciting, but we didn't know how to go about sort of like building software. So just to give you a background, I'd been an electronics engineer, business school, banking, and built this company, but it was more of an operations company than a pure software company.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to think about product. I didn't know how to think about. So I had like these. I was like kind of coming up with these crazy ideas, and I was going to VCs in London. They'd be like, Rahul, you have a nice mind, but you don't have product background, and you really need to sort of spend some time in actually working for a good product organization and learn how to build a product, and then maybe start a company. So, and that happened when I was in. So while I was traveling, I ended up in Valley, and I was at this party at AngelList's office in the Valley, and one of the AngelList partners in Europe had invited me to that party. And I ended up meeting a bunch of VCs. And they were like, wow, like, and they knew me from the fundraising times of my first company. And they said, like, what are you doing these days? La, la, la. And like, we were discussing ideas, jamming ideas in the Valley, completely drunk with all these VCs. And then suddenly, people are like, okay, you should come back when you're back in London. Like, let's catch up for a coffee and let's see what you want to do. And like, maybe we can either you can work for one of our portfolio companies or so you can start a new company. So I was like, fine. And then I end up in London back again. And one of my favorite products in London, it still is like is City Mapper, which is a public transport app with around 50 million daily active users. And it's a loved product in London, right? So I was like, I want to work for this company. And the VC who had done their seed round introduced me to the founder, and I went and met the founder, right? Like both of us bonded very fast in the first sort of like conversation. The next I had to fly to India, right? So I come back to India for 2 days, and the founder on Sunday evening writes, "Hey dude, like, can you come in the morning back to your offices?" And for me, like, I was just like, "Oh my god, like this guy wants to talk to me." And I was sitting in India at that point, and this guy is talking in London. I basically book a flight that night back to London to meet him in the morning in London, right? I reached the airport in Delhi, and the stupidest thing I've done is I booked a flight from London to Delhi, not Delhi to yeah, I booked complete reverse flight. So then I had to take a flight from Delhi to Bombay. I booked a new flight from Delhi to Bombay to London. And it took me around like 15, 16 hours to get to London. I reached London in a taxi. I throw my stuff in my house. And I go to the office, right? And go to the office. This guy makes me fucking meet the whole company, right? Like, I have like 9 hours long interview. I'm sitting in a room with no oxygen, pretty much. For 9 hours, I'm in the room being grilled about all these different things. And I had not prepared for this interview. It was almost like a natural, free flowing conversation, and I just enjoyed it so much, and the team enjoyed it so much. The guy was like, "Can you join tomorrow?" Right? And I joined the company the next morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in the office.
Yeah.
And that was my journey to product. Like,
Wow.
But before that, like the fun thing was I'd not really thought about product management as a job, or I think I just went to the company as if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, doing my sort of like stuff, focusing on my stuff in the company. I really enjoyed that experience.
So after that, like, how long did you work with that company, and what was like that?
So I worked for almost 2 years, and then COVID hit, and then as soon as COVID hit, I used to love working in the offices, and I used to love like working with people, like your whole team sitting in one sort of like flow plate, and you could just like walk up to people, ask questions, discuss stuff, and like sort of like hammer out problems very quickly with the engineers, with the designers, with the business folks, and it was a lot of fun. And suddenly COVID happened, like the whole team, more like everything just like sort of like working was fine, but the whole team community feeling completely died down. And with that, like I was like, if remote work has to happen, because everybody talking about remote work back then, and COVID seemed that it would just last forever, like in 2011, 2021. Sorry. I thought that basically, like somebody needs to figure out how would synchronous remote work, right? Like everybody's working asynchronous remote work, but I was like, there are people who want to have people around them all the time, right? There are people who want to just like sort of like bugger off and like not talk to people, but there are people who want to be with people, like especially people in sales or marketing or product or like all these different professions. Like people love people. That's why they are in these professions.
Yes.
Right. So I was like, somebody needs to come up with a solution. And that's where I left my Citymapper company and sort of like started sort of like tinkering with a few ideas around this space and came up with the idea. And it's very funny because like with it, compared to my previous startup where it took almost 1.5 years to raise $500,000, over here, when I started the company, within, I guess, like 20 days, I got a £2.5 million term sheet from one of the best pieces in London. And it was a great like journey and ride with them building the company.
Very cool. I mean, this has been like, just fascinating learning about, how you move from investment banking to cooking and then cooking to building a bootstrap startup and then you are like VC backed startup and now being an indie hacker.
Yeah.
In a way, an indie hacker. And I think that is like very fascinating about your journey. So tell us like how it has been coming back to Turncoat and living in the Himalayas for the last 1 year and like exploring like new things these days.
Yeah. It's been
Yeah.
it's been so when I basically left London, right? Like so this was a venture capital backed company which I started for remote work. And like during COVID, our company was growing like crazy, right? Like we were the star child of London venture capital ecosystem. Everybody wanted to invest in us. I would be getting like emails from all top VCs, all top partners saying that, hey, like we'd love to talk, we'd love to meet for a online chat. And suddenly once COVID ended, I think most companies decided that they want to go back to office.
Yes.
Like all the people who love synchronous work kind of like went to return to office kind of
And
like.
you feel like you said you also like going.
I also love. It was a bit of a contradiction in my own mind.
Yeah.
That I loved the offices. I love sort of like spaces, but I was trying to build an online space. And then sort of like once COVID opened up, like you were like, okay, I can go to a cafe, a restaurant, and this and that. And suddenly, I also wanted to go out.
Yeah.
Right. So it created a conflict in obviously the customer base also.
Yes.
In the founder also.
Yes. Yes.
So the revenue numbers started dropping down, the user numbers started dropping down, and I was a bit disheartened because it was almost like you spent 2 years with PMF,
Yes.
right? People loving your product. Like on Product Hunt, like we had amazing reviews. Everywhere we would get amazing reviews, like a lot of hearts, a lot of smileys, like people happy every time. And then suddenly your product is pretty much like nobody wants to use it, right? Except online universities. We'll come to that later. And I was very disheartened, completely lost, right? I was like, I've poured energy into this and it's not gone anywhere. So what happens? So, and I wasn't able to like obviously a lot of people say, well, let's pivot, let's change the idea. But it was very hard to pivot, like something which has already seen, like tasted success, to pivot suddenly to a new idea and sort of like let go of the code base, which you've invested so much into mentally, emotionally, and also with time. It was very hard. So I took it like emotionally, it was very hard on me. So again, like I had to sort of like space out from it, and I took a break. And like I basically sat down with myself in London. Like I was like not doing much for one year, but didn't really get any excitement of doing something new, right? And London is an expensive city. I was like burning a lot of capital, like burning a lot of my savings every month, living, not doing anything, right? So I decided that like London chapter for now, like that was last year March, is over, and I'm going to move to India where the cost of like is cheaper. And then I somehow ended up in Dharamshala because see, like I'm not a person who likes sun, right? I'm like more of a cold person. Like people in London are like they want the sun, but I went to London because I like the cold. So in India, I said okay, the mountains are the best place for me.
Yeah.
So and somehow like one of the yoga teachers I used to follow was doing a retreat here. So I came here for a week of retreat with him, and somehow I just fell in love with the place. And for 1 year now I've been here. And in this 1 year, I think like the first 8-9 months I didn't do anything. Like I was so mentally burnt out. I was so emotionally traumatized, like emotionally sort of lost.
Yeah.
That I went to an Ayurvedic doctor. I went to a classical Indian guru. both of them recommended me to do nothing. They said, like, go into the mountains, just watch the nature. You're not supposed to do anything. And that was the hardest thing I think I've done in life. Right? Like, since, like, let's say from my undergrad to up to this point, up to that point, I just been doing.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
Like,
yes.
there's a mentality of just doing all the time.
Yes.
And for me, somebody to say, Rahul, you're not supposed to do anything,
Uh-huh.
was just like, what the hell is this guy talking about? What
Yes.
does doing nothing mean, even
Yes.
mean?
Yes.
Right? And I think, like, those few months of doing nothing, like this was last year summer, doing nothing really shifted my perspective about life and about sort of like what does following an intuition actually mean. And yeah, like that healed me. And then I started discovering, like, figuring out like new routes. On Twitter, everybody was going crazy about AI. I was like, what the fuck is AI? I obviously know what AI is, but I've not really tinkered with it.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, like, let's end up, we're sitting in the Ramshala anyway. We have great Wi-Fi. So I just started playing around with AI. Like, I started building. I'll go out to local people, like my Ayurvedic doctor. Hey man, like, what do you like to build? He was like, can you build me a chatbot which basically takes like Ayurvedic books and we can talk with it. So that was my kind of like first project I was tinkering with. And someone started realizing that as I was tinkering with these kind of like projects, then I started thought I'll build an astrology app, like, like very like woo-woo kind of concepts.
Yeah.
But sort of like it was something I was interested. It was something which I was interested in. So I started playing around with AI with it, and I started realizing that like what earlier I used to need like millions of dollars in capital to hire the top best engineers. Now you have this system with which you can create the code bases yourself. Just as a product manager would work with engineers, now as a product manager I could work with AI.
So you are not a deeply technical person. Like you were not the co-founder in your startups who is like the software or the tech lead, right? Or were you?
Not really.
Not really.
Not really. I think like I've always been a curious guy, so I get deep into everything, whatever I'm doing. But I always didn't like coding, right? Like I could edit code, I could read code, I could understand everything, but like sort of I would never get into because I found coding to be very laborious. Like it's just like you need to think about all the edge cases and sort of like code them and sort of like I'm a big picture guy. But I'm an execution driven person, but I'm a big picture guy, right? So coding and going into the nitty gritties would sometimes basically make me go a bit mad, right? So I had done a lot of coding courses. I've done a lot of trying to become a coder for many years because I had this urge that I want to build whatever I'm thinking by myself, right? But never really got around it, right? So what happened with Cursor was that sort of suddenly, like the way I would be talking to engineers, I started talking to the like Cursor and Claude, and suddenly we could give the output. I was like, okay, like the laborious stuff is gone. The laborious stuff of coding, like Cursor is willing to do it. Then I just need to think the big picture, and also like and also when the code is generated by Cursor or Claude, you have a lot of bugs. I think everybody on the internet these days talking about bugs.
Yes.
And as a PM, you are the chief bug officer.
Yes.
Like in the company, right? So I think because I've been doing that for such a long time, finding bugs and sort of like trying to fix them, I think somehow this world of AI 10x'd me, where suddenly I have like now this like small chat window in Cursor, which I think of it as like a Slack, right? Like just as like a typical PM setup, you have 8 engineers, one or two designers, and one PM working in a squad. Now I think that okay, like I have this like small box in which I can type away whatever I want, and then I'll get the results just like I would get with a team.
So if I understand, Rahul, your journey is like from an investment banker to a chef. You didn't go do it professionally.
Yes.
But
I still want to do it. I think like once I make a bunch of money, I would like to open a restaurant.
Okay, got
That's
it.
also there.
Then you became like a founder who's like more the typical CEO person.
Yeah.
Then you are now from founder transitioning to an engineer role, which is very different from a founder workflow. So over the last 3-4 months, as you were sharing, like, okay, you have been deep into like using Cursor. I think what we want to share is like more of like, how are you able to transition that quickly? And what is like your mode of communication and everything? And maybe like we can go deep into like, okay, how do you actually make those things?
Yeah. So I think it's exactly the same as to how you would start thinking about building a product with a team, right? Like I don't consider that whatever tools I'm using is actually very different from humans. I think somehow all the people who have built all these AIs have I think made them very human to work with, right? So I in my own head perceive everything like all these agents as human beings, right? I don't know, like it's the best thing to think about like that, but my mind somehow processes them as humans. And the way I think of it is almost like I'm giving instructions to a human, right? So initially, like for example, if I start trying to build a product, I'll write a basic product scope. Right? I will start with like, hey, what are the different features I want, and what sort of like are the different tech stack in my mind, right? Like I know basic words, right? So I would just basically give those to Cloud, and then ask it, hey, can you help me figure this out? Like what should be the tech stack? Like what should we be using? What are the different libraries we can use to sort of like fasten the process? So once I have the documentation ready, right, then I give that documentation to Cursor. Right.
So I think let's just walk through one example.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we should also do a little bit of practical along with this on like just so people understand how they can actually make these moves. Let's say an example. I think in the last 10 days I have seen like you working on like at least 5 projects, and the way you build this MVP so quickly, I think that is a real skill. So let's just take an example. Like last week we were talking about skin glow. Maybe that is an example, or even like just this video thing what you're building. So maybe we go into that example.
Sure.
So let's talk about skin glow. Like how did you this what how did it start, and like how quickly you were able to get it to an MVP?
So I think the secret is actually feeling the problem yourself. I think that's the first step, because if you can feel the problem, you can actually figure out a product scope very fast. Because I feel like a lot of people try to build product for others, right? And when you're doing that, you don't really know what product to build, right? So I pretty much, when I'm building products, focus on my own problems, right? So you know the exact product you want. Now let's take the example of skincare, right? So I've always struggled with acne across my life. When I started using Claude, right? I made a dermatologist out of one of the Claude charts, right? So what I would do is I would click a picture, a selfie of my own self, put it into Claude, and ask it like, can I analyze my skin? Can I give me skincare recommendations, right? And then daily, I would give my face to Claude, right? And then it would basically tell me, is my skin improving? Is my skin deteriorating? Any need of any change in skin regimen? And I also started giving it like what food I'm eating, etc., etc., right? So for a few months, I've been on this Claude journey where I was basically doing this, right? And then sort of like I think all of us guys were like, okay, let's hack a product together. And this product has been in my mind that I want to have a dermatologist in my pocket, right? So I said, okay, can we hack together a product where we can like click a picture, get some product recommendations, and build a skin journal out of it. And because I knew what I wanted as a product, I think there was not much time spent in user research. We just said, okay, these are the features I want.
So all right, Rahul, we were just talking about the skin app that you were talking about. So let's just like share a little bit about how you were using Claude for yourself, and you transition into building a product for it. So tell us a little bit more about it.
So one of the product philosophies which I've had, like ranging from let's say the laundry company, or from like the city mapper public transport app, or the community product which I was building for remote work. One of the philosophies has been like I only build products for myself, right? My basic thesis is that if I'm building product for myself and there are few hundreds of thousands or millions of people having the same problem, then the product will resonate with others.
One thing I want to say on this, like I think YC keeps saying the same thing when they are like investing in startups. Like, hey, build something for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other side, they're like, hey, build something for yourself because that's gonna scale into a venture-backed company too, because YC invest. So do you feel like working in this way, in this style about working on your problems actually can lead to very big solutions, which means like every person is facing the same problem?
I think yes and no. I think it's an interesting, like when people start thinking about problems, they start thinking about a to-do list manager, right, or a weather app, right? That's not all the problems everybody's facing. See, everybody is working somewhere, doing something in their life, and across those things, you have problems, right? So, for example, like if I was a founder of a previous company, right? So I was not just like a person having to use to-do lists, apps, or everything. I had accounting problems. I had HR problems. I had leadership problems. I had so everywhere you turn around, there's a problem that is waiting to be solved. Right? It's just like the eye you're looking at it from. So I feel like every human being, if we are in this earth, and if we say that if Buddha has said that life is suffering, right? So if life is suffering, then everybody is suffering with some problem or the other, right? And I believe that software and technology has given us tools to solve those problems, right? So I feel that YC says that yes, solve problems for yourself. Obviously, with the classical old school venture capital model, where you needed like a massive team to build software products, you always wanted to have ideas which would scale to millions of users. Right? Only then you would have a company which would sort of like be valued $100 million or $1 billion, right? But now in the new world where software development cost has significantly reduced because of AI, you suddenly have a new market where individual people can build a niche product for their own community, have even 1,000 users, paying $10 each a month, right? So suddenly you are one person financially independent. So in the old school world, yes, you would think about problems, your own problems, but you will have a filter that I want to only build products which could scale to billions of users, because only then you can get venture capital funding, and only then you can actually have the engineering team to build the product, and then only then can you actually have them like the product to scale it, right? But in the new world, where sort of like that parameter has been removed, so suddenly you have like this burst of people who want to become solopreneurs, who can solve their own problems, and have like these very niche community driven startups to
So in a way, I think
monetize.
the way I was asking the question is like, okay, this model, I mean, all of us like face the same problems in the world? Because whenever someone is saying, like, let's say YC is saying, solve a problem for yourself,
No.
right? I mean, in a way, when you are saying like, okay, well, you can be financially independent by being a niche product, by building a niche product for yourself, which will scale to 1,000 users. But if you, and I mean, YC or the VC model says that this is also the truth, which means, in a way, by building for yourself, you can create any kind of business, whether it's a lifestyle, a niche one, or like $1 billion company, right?
Definitely. Like I feel like it's just a matter of like what your dreams and ambitions are. Like some people want to build $1 billion companies, some people are happy with $100 million companies, some people are happy with just like $100,000.
Let me ask you this now. Everyone's saying there's gonna be first $1 billion company possible by a solopreneur.
Yeah.
Do you believe in that?
I do believe in that. I think within 1 year we'll read an article somewhere that somebody has actually done it, and I think it's almost like like races. Like I'm big into running, right? Like when people break a record, right? Suddenly they have 10 other people breaking the same record, right? Like building a decathon, like 30 years ago was almost unheard of. Now, like most unicorns, like it's once a human being has done it, then everybody thinks it's doable, and the bar basically becomes that. So I feel like yes, it's right now it has not been done, but with the technology which we have now, and I think like I've been experimenting in the last 4 months with Cursor. I think the thing is like when I think of it as a founder, like when I was running a team, like in a job as a product manager and also as a founder, we're running a team like everybody's doing a specific task. Now, the new way to think about these things is that like every function, sales, marketing, HR, finance, you can either build an agent of yourself using Cursor for doing that task, or you can like get an agent from which has been built by another company to do that task. So I think like if a founder really sits down and thinks through what are the different tasks that a company needs to do and starts using agents built by themselves or by other companies, like you can really automate most of the stuff that is being done out there. Like for example, for me, like I'm basically like I have a tool. For example, for content marketing, I built a tool for Instagram Reels. I for sort of like sales, I built a system which is sending messages out to like so the relevant people.
So Rahul, here's what we want to do
Yeah.
the rest of the conversation.
Yeah.
A big part of our audience actually want to understand how to be that among the first, let's say, 100 people who will build these $1 billion company. They're ready to work hard, they are resilient, and they're curious. And I feel like you have definitely cracked a lot of those. So how about we start deep diving into it? Like, okay, someone starts with zero background, not a software developer, but a lot of resilience, hardworking person, and curious person. Now tell us how they're gonna get started.
I think like the one philosophy which I feel like people applying sort of trying course around it is the beginner mindset. I think if you start with a blank slate, I think that's the best. I think it's very hard to like. I feel that like this is going to be a very controversial statement, but I feel software engineers are struggling the most with using Cursor. I think people who have no background in software have a higher chance of cracking Cursor than software engineers, because software engineers come with a lot of baggage of how things are supposed to be done. So they're not using AI in a native in the way it's supposed to be used. Whereas a person who has no background will approach like a software development environment like Cursor with a very beginner mindset, right? So because
So
coding
you're saying that first $1 billion company might actually be
might actually be done by non-software
non-software developer? someone who's like in some other role but has a beginner's mindset.
Exactly. I think beginner's mindset is very important because it actually makes you curious. I think that the world now is for the people who are curious and are willing to start with a plan. See, I'm not against software developers.
Yes.
I'm not against anybody, right? It's just that even the bestest of software developers can start with a blank slate. Now, when I was starting like coding with Cursor, initially when I would talk to people, people would like, oh, like this is how code should be structured. This is how this should be done. But most of the coding patterns which have been followed for the last 20, 30 years have been for coding with a team. Right? Like you have the PR requests, somebody to review, like you have like code structured in such a way that multiple people can work on the code. But with AI, those constraints are no longer true. So you need to figure out an AI native way to code, right? So, but if you have a lot of like patterns from the past where things are supposed to be done a particular way and that's how your mind thinks, you're suddenly enforcing those rules onto new paradigms of work, right? So it's almost like so how I think about Cursor and sort of like this new world of software is like in the old world, like before YouTube, let's say, right? Before YouTube, if you had to if you had to make a movie, right? You had to go out and raise capital. You had to have a bunch of team. You had a cameraman, producers, directors, actors, everybody to get a. Now suddenly YouTube came along. Everybody with an iPhone camera could make a video.
Yeah.
Right. And suddenly you could have like people like with a camera who are creative enough to rethink how a movie has to be made, were able to use that platform to create very engaging videos, right? So there were old paradigms of how things are supposed to be done in the filmmaking business, but with people who are willing to use the medium in a new way with the beginner's mindset, were able to crack the code of YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, there are like all these sometimes like 10-year-old kids who have like,
Exactly.
influencers with like 5 million or like millions of followers.
Exactly.
Right? They just like started because I mean, they didn't have, and I mean, a lot of people are like, who are like, let's say in their 30s or 40s,
Yeah.
they are like, I want to be a content creator, but not able to create content, which I think is very much about like a beginner's mindset.
Exactly.
Talking about.
Yeah. So I think like it's almost like being willing to say, I don't know anything. And I'm willing to sort of tinker around and I'm willing to experiment with new ways, new way paradigms of doing things. For example, initially when I started coding, right, the classical mindset is we should split code into like multiple files, have it very modular, etc., right? I was like, fuck this. You know, like I don't care about this whole thing. Like, why do I need to like make my code modular? Even though I know why it needs to be modular. So what I did was like because I was beginner, I just said I'll have one file in my code which is front end and one file which is going to be back end. All the front end code is going to go in one file and all the back end code is going to go in one file. And the product worked. So this is like 6 months ago when sort of like Cursor and Claude were not that good. And at that time, it worked. And if I would show an engineer, they'd be like laughing their face off looking at the code. But the thing is like when the front end and back end used to be in one code file each, I actually, as a person who had no background in engineering, could actually understand what the hell was happening in my code. Now, suddenly, if you have like 20 files in which your front end is split and 20 files in which your back end is split, like a person who's just starting out will have no damn idea what the hell is happening in their code, right? Like you can't figure out like how the code is flowing, how the numbers are flowing. But if you have one front end, one back end, suddenly, and for me, that was a great learning ground to understand how things were flowing around the code and what was actually making it work.
So let me ask a question to Adi now, right now. Like he's an engineer, worked in the engineering for 7 years. You hear Rahul's opinions about like, okay, how I mean, every it's not about software engineering. I feel like every career has like its own set of rules that get defined over a period of time. Because that just like that's like what people call as I don't know, is it tacit knowledge that gets passed across generation about like software developer. So there is a lot of knowledge even in the career software developer. So what do you feel like? Okay, as he's describing about like he's saying like one front end, one back end. You're like holy shit, I don't mean
That's a bit crazy.
yeah, you're like this guy. I don't know. He doesn't know software engineering. That might be your third initial reaction. Like what? But like what are you perceiving from his perspective?
Yeah, so I think in the cycle, writing code is actually like the easiest part. It's debugging and maintaining it. So my questions would be like, you've built your MVP. Now how do you maintain it and how do you scale it?
Yeah.
Can you still keep using Cursor to build out your product? Or at some point, does Cursor and Claude just give up and fail?
I think I don't know the answer. There is no 100% answer. Like nobody can know. Like unless I scale up.
I mean, even like even EV companies that are backed by VC, I mean, tech is changing so quickly. The languages are changing so quickly that you always end up with like new tech, and there is like a lot of tech debt. So when you talk about like, hey, like can you scale it? I mean, this is a problem even in the current world when there are software engineers using the right.
I think like what Adi saying is right? Like in some ways, like for any person who's using Cloud and Cursor to build out their code, they need to understand what the hell is happening.
Yeah.
Right? Like in any complete software project, you'll have APIs, you'll have backend, you'll have front end, you'll have the database, you'll have sort of like stuff moving around, like numbers going up and down the chain. Now, for a person who has no background in engineering, for a person who has no background in coding, they need to understand that, right? So that's why when I say like the classical knowledge will say you should have all the code split into multiple files, but when a new person is starting, the best way is to put all your front end in one place, all your back end in one place, and actually try to understand how is the code flowing. So I'm very much anti the people who say, "Oh, no, you don't need to read the code." Actually, you do need to read the code, and only then can you actually become a person who can use Claude and Cursor properly, right? But for that, there are steps. You can't just you can't just give an instruction to Claude and be like, "Hey, Claude, build me this," and yes, it will throw out a bunch of code, but if you don't understand it, you'll end up with the exact same problem what Adi is saying, that you can't scale. You can't work with the code. You can't debug the problems because you don't know what actually Claude has done. So if you have to start, I would say start with one front-end file, one back-end file, and crush the code into, like, ask Claude to basically crush the code into it, and then actually spend time understanding what has come out of it.
So maybe like one way when I'm like just listening to you here about like how you approach it, you are a person who's like founder, who was a founder. So you're starting from -1 and you are going all the way into building a very solid product by yourself. While a software engineer might be at a point 0 or point 1 in the journey, like above 0, who's starting from there. So they might have a way of like, okay, this is how the software should be coded. You're starting from -1 and then you are like gonna go to 0 and you're like your approach might be like, hey, actually just first start with getting something out, which is a very much of a PM approach. Like get something out as -1. Who cares whether it starts from 0? I don't care, right? When I'm testing out the MVP, it should be like -1 to 0 first, right? So you're saying start with -1 to 0, build something, then go into that journey about scale and debugging and all. Those are all future things. So the cost of building has come down, or the cost of demand testing has come down so much that you can test it out very quickly that whether this is a thing or not. Then you think about scale. Like half of the startups do not even reach any scale. So you end up wasting a lot of engineering expensive resources, and those products never see the light of the day. So maybe like there's some kind of like value in you approaching it that way.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's about creating value, right?
Even in my previous like roles as product or founder, right, I have a bunch of people with diverse skill sets. See, Adi chose to be an engineer because he thinks in a certain way. He thinks systems. He thinks fault tolerance, right? I think in a very different way. I think like, how is the product looking? How is what is the user getting, right? So all of us have chosen different professions based upon how our mind actually thinks about the world, right? So I feel there is value in every different opinion out there. Like I can't say Ali's wrong, but I'm right, or I'm wrong, he's right. I think you just need to know at what stage you want which, as a good PM, like or a good founder knows at different stages of the company or a different stage of the product, you need to apply different mindsets to the whole thing.
I mean, it does come down to everything comes down to good judgment, Like, I mean, knowing that this might be a better judgment at this stage.
Exactly.
And maybe like down the line, once you're scaling, you're like, okay, well, we got to make it modular. We got to figure out. And then you're like, maybe I need like, do you feel, I mean, we're talking about.
Yeah, you do need to make the code modular at some point or the other, right? Like you can't survive otherwise. See, the code will throw errors.
Yeah.
So if you're working with Cloud, like, yes, you'll get an MVP very fast. Within 1 or 2 hours, you can knock out an MVP, which would have taken, let's say, a month before with 2 engineers. Yes, you can do that. But then to actually make it production ready, there is going to be a lot of errors, and you need to work through all of them, right? To work through all of them, you will end up having to spend time to read the code, modularize the code, refactor it. So, but you got. But the problem, like for example, a lot of my friends have tried doing Claude, and obviously there are a lot of YouTube videos, people showing coding. The thing is, that's become very easy, but that's not going to get you users. That's not going to get you sort of like the product to be shipping ready. So for example, I'll give you an example. So I had basically built a booking reservation system for a hotel which I'm staying in, right? And I vibe coded it. Okay, I vibe coded the product in like almost two days, and the product was ready. I was very happy. I was like, yeah, I've done something.
Yeah.
Then I gave the product to the user, and then she could see all the different, all like rooms and bookings of all the users in the platform, right? All the users meaning there are 3 other hotels like testing the product out. She could see from her app like all the other hotels bookings in the product. So Claude had made a mistake right, of not having an authentication token being going to the backend. It was just pulling all the data from the database, right? And I asked Claude, like, dude, what the hell have you done? This is just wrong. He's like, oh, like, I'm an AI, not a human being, and sort of like, and I got really angry. I started coding like, what the hell, what, like literally swearing at Claude, and just said, oh, these kind of mistakes also happen in real time environments if you're shipping fast enough.
Wow.
It's like, okay, like so
It's kind of true.
It's
If you
kind of
work with, like, let's say a tier two developer, or if they are developing
exactly
something enough,
so
You will create
you
excuses.
can end up making like very stupid blunderous mistakes in your code. Like imagine like you're building a product where all the users can see all the other users' information.
Yeah.
That's not like GDPR.
Yeah.
Like it's against everything.
Yeah.
So yes, you can get an MVP out. Claude can throw out an MVP. It will look nice. It will work. But then there can be very significant errors in the system. I think yesterday I was reading with Vercel, somebody could attack into the like middleware, like any Next.js app on Vercel, like it could be attacked through sort of like any hacker could attack very easily,
Yeah.
like the server for anything hosted on Vercel. And there was whole debacle between the Cloudflare founder and the Vercel founder on Twitter.
Yeah. And the Replit founder, I think.
And the Replit founder.
Like
So I think like it's this vibe coding. It's great.
Mhm.
It's enabling a lot of things, but you would obviously don't need to become the classical software engineer of the olden world. Like it's almost like when we move from punch cards to computer, it's the same movement where we are moving from code to sort of like prompting, right? So it's almost like we will need to find some patterns out of the old way of working, but a lot of new patterns of work will also be invented in parallel with how we sort of like think about code.
Got it. So I think now, like, let's say we got a good idea that it's very much possible to create very quickly very high quality code.
Yeah.
So help me understand. Let's go from -1.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's push to talk about an idea.
Yeah.
And let's get a someone who is like a founder who has no coding background to like how to ask the right question, because I think the art is about asking the right question. So let's go deep into it. Do you want to like give us a background? How would you approach like from -1?
Sure, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
So let me just like actually give you a demo of how we could do that. So let me share my screen. Am I sharing my screen? I think I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
So the first step I would give to any founder who's using sort of like Cursor is to, rather than you typing their prompts, to start using Apple's speech to text. They should always be talking to Cursor, not like writing down, because I feel like talking is a very natural human way of like thinking, and writing makes you become more structured and more concise. But when you're talking, like we can give a lot of context which might be missing. Um, and prompts work best when you give them a lot of context.
Yes.
Right? So my basic philosophy has been always be talking to Cursor, never be writing to Cursor. Right.
So let's start with like
Let's start with writing.
How do you write a
So
first prompt?
basically, like let's say we are building this product for. I'll give you so I have been using Claude for a while now. For basically, like I've had severe acne problems for a long while, right? So I said, like, obviously I'm not trying to replace Claude by my dermatologist, right? Like obviously I believe like doctors should be there, but persistent acne has been there. So I thought, like, how about I will give Claude my selfies every day and let Claude basically define my skincare regimen, tell me how my skin is improving, what's happening. And it has been a miraculous journey for me.
And I feel like a lot of people actually use Claude for that, but what they don't do is using voice to kind of like voice to text, because I feel, I mean, people do it for a little bit and then they're like, oh, it's not showing me results, or like it's taking a lot of time.
Yeah.
Maybe the first thing you shared is like how to actually talk to your Claude with using the language. So how to enable that feature? How do people get access there?
So I think like that. Okay. So quickly going into, so you can open up your system settings.
Yes.
And your accessibility. You can basically, you have a thing called voice control. And if you just switch on your voice control, you have like this a voice control thing at the top or in your top bar. And then you just say start listening. And once you say start listening, if you are into any input boxes, it will start recording. So for example, Claude, are you hearing me? I don't know why it's not working. Doesn't seem to work. Maybe because the mic is being used. Oh, it's working.
Yeah.
So yeah, like so for example, right now my voice control is listening. So in any text box, right, it will start typing whatever I'm saying, right? So it's a very different way of working with a MacBook, where you are typically used to clicking on buttons. Suddenly, in the world of prompting, in the world of sort of like giving context to computer, you can start talking. So just like talk like a human being. So as I'm talking, you can see all the transcript appearing in front of my screen. And I think that's a very good way of working with AI.
So you use the desktop app of Claude, or you use kind of like just the web one, or does it?
So for Cloud, I think like I use the web version, but for Cursor, I use for the AI engine, I use
The IDE.
the actual IDE.
And why? I mean, in this conversation, we have been talking a lot about kind of like Claude and not ChatGPT. What difference did you find?
I don't know actually. Like the thing with OpenAI is I've never been satisfied with their answers. Like it almost seems I'm just I think it's more of a taste thing. I always have liked Claude's answers better than ChatGPT. And also with coding, I think one of the things which I realized was that, for example, on Cursor, I'm not able to give images to OpenAI, right? Like for example, if I want to give screenshots of bugs happening or errors happening, or I'm going to give screen recordings, I'm not able to do that to OpenAI. But for Claude, I can give images and it actually analyzes images very well. So Claude has been my natural choice for all the different AI activities I'm working with.
Got it. So here I see now this whole transcript coming together, just like based on our conversation on the screen.
Yeah.
So how? So I mean, also all these different tools by itself, like ChatGPT also supports like audio.
Yeah.
But what is the difference you found by using the MacBook One versus everything else?
I think it totally depends. I think when I'm using Claude mobile, I'm using the Claude sort of like my microphone functionality. I think that's good enough. When I'm using my MacBook, I use the Mac system.
Got it.
Because on Cursor, like, they don't have a mic button yet, but if I guess they put a mic button to transcribe my text, I'll use that. So I think it's just a hack, which I've sort of like hacked together
Got it.
to use.
Now let's go into the chat that we were talking about.
Yeah. So I've been using. So for example, like if you look at this thing, so I've had so with my skin, I've been basically giving it skincare products and giving it selfies and trying to figure out like what problems, how can they be solved. So I've used this as almost like a skin journal for me, and almost like getting skincare recommendations. So I guess a lot of people do that on Reddit, a lot of people do that on sort of like Instagram. So I basically said, okay, let's use AI for that. And the beauty of AI is like it actually knows about all the different products that are in different skincare markets, like which particular like skincare ingredient can be found in which particular product and what to avoid, what not to avoid. It can do a lot of analysis in the back, right? So I said like how now, but most people are not going to use Claude for skincare. Like you need to build a very dedicated product which has like the right workflows, the right sort of like UX, right sort of like the right answers, verified through some certain sources. So you need to build that. So I think for that you need to build a separate software product. That's my thinking.
Yeah. So before we go into this, I would love to understand a little bit. See, human beings are very much driven by outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about going to a dermatologist, like, hey,
Yeah.
we are like, hey, okay, we go to a doctor and doctor says like, oh, this you do this and it's gonna be fixed in like a month or two.
Yeah.
Now on the AI, like there is no little guarantee. Definitely is decent good, right? And I mean, even from a doctor perspective, sometimes when we see like the doctor, it's not showing results, people are like, all right, I'm gonna change my doctor. Based on just experience that you have with using Claude, do you feel you were able to get to a sufficient outcome where you felt that it was able to deliver me a value that I didn't have? And if the answer is no, I mean, it's still tells us a lot about something.
See, it's controversial, right? Like I personally, like, I am one of those guys who's a Google doctor, right? Like I use Google as a doctor, right? Obviously, people say not to do that. I should go to the real doctor. But the thing is, like, we live in a world where information is easily available. If I have a problem, I am going to Google it. I am going to use AI to figure out like what the solution is. Yes, I would like to go to a doctor also, but in many cases, when you go to a doctor, you can't like just like talk to the doctor, right? Like you give it a 20-minute slot, the doctor gives you a prescription, and then you're back home. But with AI, or even with Google, the old world, like blogs and stuff, and Reddit and stuff, you could just like gather a lot of information about a specific problem, find the people in the world who are suffering from the same problem as you are, right? And sort of like form a community, find the right solutions. Now, I feel that for AI, for me, for skincare especially, like I've been able to like talk about each and every individual ingredient in skincare products to figure out what is working and what is not working for me with AI. Now, as a person who likes to dig deep, like into the chemistry, how it's affecting the skin, it's been very helpful. So I feel like it has helped me a lot. But I guess different people have different behaviors.
Do you feel like, I mean, I think different, even if there are different people with different behavior, I have realized, like, when people go to a doctor,
Yeah.
they are very curious about, like, tell me why this is happening. And doctor does give an answer and be like, okay, well, maybe some people are like, oh, I just want the solution and I want this problem to go away. But a lot of people are like, I'm curious about, like, okay, well, what is really going on? And you are saying the value prop here is like, maybe let's say a dermatologist might know a little bit about different products, but not be able to scale it to like hundreds of skincare products and say like, oh, this ingredient might be an issue. Or like even in your own journey, like, not able to get to like, okay, this might be actually kind of giving a negative reaction. You are saying like Claude is able to do that, which actually means not to like say anything about the quality of dermatologists, but I'm saying in the output processing or like able to generate new value for you, it might actually be able to do a better job than a doctor.
Maybe. I think it's the classical debate which has been happening about AI. Like, will AI replace coders? Will AI replace doctors? Will AI replace? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. I think it's going to depend upon how accurate these things can become, how sort of like good at coding it can become, how good like actually making a prescription. But it will take time. Like the accuracy will take time. Humans are not going to trust computers that very fast. But like, if you think about this, like 30 years ago, like like people would never believe that there'll be accounting softwares, right? Like people were using calculators, people were using accounting sort of like doing it on spreadsheets, and that was the way things were done. But suddenly you have computers now where people trust like huge sums of money. Like our whole financial cash is a number in a bank account in a database somewhere, and we trust that.
Yeah.
So I think over time, like as the trust builds on systems, we are going to start trusting AI with a lot of critical information and to get results. Like this is very early days, right? It's like the first 2 years.
Yeah.
It's like 1997 of internet, right?
Yeah, I think one thing I'm realizing, like, just the conversation we are doing, like, even if, like, let's say the jobs are going to be transformed in whichever way it's going to go, when we talk about, like, one person running, like, let's say a multi-million dollar, billion-dollar company, we are actually helping people to be on that journey, to be that person who actually still has a job.
Yeah.
Because if everyone has to lose their job, a founder will still keep a job, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like, see, very hard to say because I don't really like personally me, like I don't get to the debate of what's going to happen to the future because it's very hard to predict the future, right? We don't know how the world is going to shape, what kind of new problems are going to come up. See, the thing is, like, there are always going to be problems that need to be solved. Like, we have not reached a point in the world where all the problems have been solved. If there are problems, there will be people who are needed to solve the problem. Suddenly, I don't expect a world where AGI has come up and all the problems in the world have been solved. So till the time the world exists, there will be problems. Till the time problems exist, we need humans to solve them. And till the time problems be solved, values be created. And if value is created, money is going to be made. Right? So this whole cycle of things happening. Yes, people might need to have new skills. People might need to retrain themselves. Need to do different things. But yeah, that's life. I think that's been happening for thousands of years across time, and nothing has changed.
All right, guys, we are back after a lot of hiccups in trying to figure out the right spot. We are back to just show you how you can create your first billion-dollar company as a solo founder. So let's over to Rahul. He's gonna teach you how anyone can build a billion-dollar company these days. So Rahul, over to you.
Cool.
So
That's a tall order.
yes. So just like let's start with -1 to 0, how we were talking about it, right? So let's start with like, okay, someone is at -1, they are a founder, they are not a software engineer. How should they get started with using technology like Cursor or anything? So let's get started with like maybe step one, what you would say.
I think the first thing it's about figuring out what you want to build. I think that's where everything starts. What problem you're trying to solve, and what sort of like what are the features you want, what features you want. Uh,
Yeah, go ahead. So at -1, what do we? How do we? How would, let's say someone is going to find their own problem, right? That's what we discussed. Now let's figure out. Let's just go with like the problem we were looking at, skin, right?
Yeah.
Skin.
Am I not audible?
Just be a little louder. I'm seeing like yeah, it's working now.
I'm audible. I'm audible. I'm audible.
And you a new app. Like we were talking about the doctor app, right?
The doctor app.
Yeah. Patient info, something like that.
But we already showed the whole skin.
So let's continue with the skin one.
Okay. You think
So skin one from scratch.
from scratch, I guess.
Okay, so I'm gonna get the cut. Until now,
Yeah.
we'll get it cut. And okay, I'm gonna yeah, I'm gonna just like get it edited. All right, guys, we are back after a little bit of hiccup in trying to figure out the right place. But we really want to show you how you can build your own company, which can turn into a $1 billion company as a solo founder right now. So it's because it's so easy to build. So here, Rahul is going to guide you through a journey about like how do you start from -1.
Yeah.
So Rahul has shared his screen. So Rahul, go ahead.
I think the first step is to write a good documentation as to what your product wants to do, what you're going to build. So I think the first step is starting to describe what you want to build. So let's say let's go about it. So first step we're going to do is add a product scope document in Cursor. So product scope.md. MD is a good sort of like format to put your documentation in sort of Cursor because it's well understood by computers. So we're going to use that. Now in product scope, like what we want to say is we, let's start writing a product scope in product scope. MD, we are building a skincare product. Skincare product. Your people can take a selfie every day and get their skin analyzed and get a recommendation of products they should use and what they should not use. Also, we would like to localize where we recommend products available in a particular geography. Help me brainstorm what features this product can have, and let's write a vision and let's write full vision of the product. Right. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get a product scope. I put in a few ideas, a few
So
features.
one thing, Rahul, I want to ask you here is like, I think a lot of people, when they look at Claude and ChatGPT, they just think that is like how you can basically get your specs generated. But here you are showing you can get your spec generated via Cursor, right?
Exactly, because like all the things which are available in the Cloud chat are available to you in Cursor, and I feel like you like I have stopped using the Cloud chat. Right, I've not been paying $20 subscription a month to Cloud. I basically use everything in Cursor. Cursor is my Cloud, right? So my workflow, and like I ask all the questions, I keep all my documentation inside one place, so that becomes a standard repository for all the information which I'm learning, and I keep it in Cursor in the left sidebar.
Perfect. So now you
So
are.
this is a very vague. So what I've done over here is a very vague description. It's not a very. You can see like I've not put in a lot of features, and I let Claude. So what I want to say is like like when you're doing a creative work, you don't want to be very specific. You want to start more general, like rather than be very specific. Let Claude generate the specifics, and then you, as a tastemaker, like almost like a person who has a good taste, will be like I like this, I don't like this, right? So I've basically made a very general prompt. I'm creating this product, click a picture, get some analysis, get some products, and let's see what Claude basically comes up with. Right? So let's press enter.
What happened?
No, nothing, nothing. So you can see Claude now is generating a whole product scope. So let's see what it comes up with. Right? Yeah. So it has come up with a whole vision statement which you can see on the screen, right? So we've named the product Dharma Book for now, basically dermatologist plus journal. That's how we've named the product. Now it's saying you're using AI-powered skincare recommendations. The core features you can see you have daily skin analysis, and it's sort of like figuring out all the different sort of problems skin can have. And so you have personalized product recommendations, geographic localization, user experience, social features, right? So it's kind of done a good job at sort of like coming up with a bunch of features which might be required, right? And it's also given us a bunch of technical requirements, right? So it's saying computer vision for skin analysis, natural language processing for product recommendations, machine learning. Now, the one interesting thing which I found about Claude is it doesn't recommend using Claude itself for doing all the analysis, right? So when it says AI ML components, so we want to tell it, hey, use Claude for all the AI ML analysis. You don't need to sort of like do the analysis, like or we don't need to build code for the machine learning or artificial intelligence. So that's something which we're going to replace from this. And also, this is a very this vision statement. It's almost the same feature which I had described in my initial prompt. So what we're going to ask Claude is to elaborate to make this more detailed and to also sort of like add more recommended features which we can have. Right. So add what other features can we have? Also, can't we use Claude slash for AI analysis and product recommendations?
The first part you did is like define your product requirements.
Yes.
And then next part.
So next part, basically like it has done a good job of summarizing what basically I wanted initially. But now I'm also going and sort of like because see I can't think of all the features, but Claude can sort of like come up with a lot of features. So I want to have a very broad picture of if you're building a product in this category, what all features are possible out there. So, and from that, we are going to first of all create a small phase one scope, like what MVP do we want to build, and also we'll also figure out the technical requirements for that MVP. That's the next steps we are going to go for.
Few things before because I'm like talking to the user is like at -1 to 0.
Yeah.
How to get cursor installed? Like what is the ID that you use? How did you set that up?
So I think like you can just go on the Cursor website like you have the download button over there. You download the Mac or Windows sort of like ID from there, and you just download and you create an account in Cursor, and then you sort of like get onto a pro plan because you don't want to be on the free plan because it makes you wait too much. When you're learning stuff, you don't want to be waiting because it will make you more cranky. So it's better to sort of like just get things fastly done, experience what fast means, right? So now, like apart from the main feature which we had come up with, it also come up with advanced AI features. For example, Claude AI integration for natural language analysis, lifestyle integration, diet and nutrition tracking, smart shopping features, advanced analytics. You see, like now it has come up with a lot of crazy features, which are possible in the spectrum, right? So which is good, right? Like now you have a template. So I guess like this will be so if you were able to build this product, this would be a very full-fledged skincare dermatologist product, which is going to be out there, which is helping people fix their lifestyle, fix their skincare regimen, track their skin across time, right? So now, and also like as I told it that to use Claude for AI and not to build like computer vision. So it has also replaced Claude AI integration for all the understanding, contextual generation. So rather than using building our own stuff, we're going to use Claude as the main. Yeah. Now, so we have this, which is great. So now we're going to basically go into the thing. What do you suggest? What do you suggest should be our MVP? Right?
You also asked what the MVP should be.
Very exactly. So let's see. I feel like Claude can do a very good job sort of figuring out what the MVP is. Like obviously we as humans know what we want. Now we'll see what Claude is saying what the MVP should be, and then we are gonna like kind of refine it. So we have an imagination of like what MVP should be, and I think like Claude is gonna generate an MVP. So let's see now, right? Like so let's come up with a minimum viable product where it says core skin analysis. It's a basic selfie capture with guided positioning, essential skin analysis features, basic progress tracking with weekly reports, simple before after comparison, right? Product recommendations. So it has basically taken the whole product roadmap which we had, right, and split it into different phases, just like any product, like any company would do, right? So we are now going to say it has also come with MVP success metrics, 10,000 active users, yes, whatever, it doesn't matter, MVP technical stack. So this is interesting. So it has already come up with an MVP technical stack, which is React Native, Node.js with Express, MongoDB, AIML with with the cloud connection, and it is for cloud is using AWS and Firebase Auth, and so it has basically come up with the whole technical stack. So we can see from here we're using kind of the MERN stack, which is one of the most popular sort of like stacks out there. And I think you can basically go and edit this if you have any knowledge of like what you are more comfortable with. Like right now, I wouldn't like worry too much about which languages we are using or what is actually happening, because the first thing is that we need to get an MVP out, right? We need to get an MVP out, and if Claude is suggesting something, like there is no point actually debating with it, right? But for example, over here, like few things is that because we're going to host this somewhere, so we'll need a place for hosting it. So one of my favorite products is Railway. Obviously, they are not our sponsors for this podcast, but we like I like using Railway. So we'll add this thing that for hosting our front end and back end. For hosting our front end and back end, we are going to use Railway, right? So that it can edit this thing. Apart from that, I guess like we are kind of okay with because you have phase one, and we have an MVP user flow where user downloads the app, creates an account, completes basic profile and skin type questionnaire, takes a first selfie, requests skin analysis, gets a product recommendation, and sets out daily selfie reminder. Now, if you're going to build a niche in MVP, we don't really need a. So I'm going to edit out a bunch of features, right? Like for the purpose of like this conversation. So we're gonna we just want to have we don't want to download the app, so we can just use let's build a web application. Let's simplify for the MVP purposes. Let's build a web application. We don't need a mobile app. We don't need the user to download, right? Then basically we don't need a daily. We don't need daily selfie reminders. So when for MVP, let's build a web application. We don't need user to download it. We don't need daily notifications, weekly progress, and, and also after the skincare analysis in the MVP, I would like to send email to users. Right? So we've kind of changed the MVP now, slightly shaped it to a new definition with what would be the most logical, because it is coming with an MVP, and we're like, well, that doesn't work. So depending upon what you would like to give to the user, you can sort of like go ahead and edit this thing. But the idea is that this product scope document is your central information source, right? Because you're going to use this document every time you're going to build anything. So you want this to be as crystal clear as possible, right?
Okay.
So now we have a new MVP user flow where we have user visits the website, completes basic profile, takes up a selfie, receives image skin analysis, gets email with detailed analysis and recommendation, use product. Yeah, that's great, right? And we can also remove, we don't want the user to create a basic profile. So we can kill user profile from, from the MVP.
So one question I have
Yeah.
is how often do you use Git with Cursor? Are you creating many checkpoints?
With Cursor, I think I think 1.5, 2 months ago, Cursor came up with a feature that you could revert code.
Okay.
So I used to use a Git a lot. With every like little change, I would use Git. But now I've basically reduced the usage. I basically commit to Git every day, rather than sort of like with every feature.
Okay.
So the workflow has slightly changed because I really trust Cursor now that it can keep track of all the changes and I can revert whenever I want.
I see.
But I guess like the good practice is to use Git a lot. Obviously, when if there's a lot of changes Claude has made and you don't like it, you might want to go back. So you can do it within Cursor, or if you're using Git, you can sort of like go back.
when you were using Git, was there ever an issue where, let's say, you Git reverted, but the context of cursor's chat still had those changes?
Yes. So I think, like, based upon the documentation of cursor, I think there's a concept of indexing of code in cursor. So cursor regularly indexes code. If you go to cursor, you see the settings. So cursor settings, there is a feature where it's saying code-based indexing, right? So this index generally is run every 10 minutes, right? Like that's what I read on Reddit or somewhere. That's what's happening. So something what I see is like in 10 minutes, if we have made some changes and reverted a lot of things very quickly. Sometimes Claude thinks that whatever was there before,
The code base is in the current
code base is in the old state.
but it's okay.
So sometimes what I do is like when I can see that that's what's happening, so I will basically press the resync index button, and it takes like few seconds for it to sync again.
Okay.
So that, yeah. So yeah. So for example, now with like as I'm sort of like killing the features from .score, as you can see, so it has also we can kill user profile. So it has removed the user authentication because for MVP we don't really need user authentication, and also it has removed the welcome email, password reset functionality. So we really come down to the very basics of what we are going to be doing about. Right? So that's great. I think like now if we quickly review like MVP is a core web application, front-end React.js, Node.js Express, hosting and railway, simple selfie uploader, applied positioning, skin analysis, email integration, basic program. Right? Now, even for email integration, like we can ask, like for example, what products can be used for email integration? Because it has not figured out in the tech stack. Has it figured out email templates, React email? Okay. So it has basically figured out email templates. So you can. So right now, what I'm going to do is because now of your features locked, so we are going to ask it for the MVP features you've decided. Is the tech stack the right stack? Is the tech stack the right stack? Or we can use already existing libraries or softwares ease our coding. Right? So now we're basically getting into the technical stack stuff. Lock the features. We are wait to see if it has better suggestions for. So it is basically coming up with a bunch of stuff.
Have you noticed cursor perform well with certain stacks?
I feel like the basic heuristic is because see, I feel like all these code bases have been trained on GitHub. So whatever code you would think that like a lot of developers would have pushed to GitHub. Like those are the stacks. I feel like this performs well. So I would like really recommend using languages which are used by everyone, like not like niche things. So that's my general sort of like takeaway from building code here. So phase one code web application. So it has added a bunch of stuff. Now, I'm not sure personally because I'm not a coder what the hell all these things are. So I'm just going to revert because I don't know what it all means. I'm just not sure how to deal with all this. Yeah. So at this point I press restore checkpoint because I'm scared. Right? So I just press restore and all the things which basically it came up with they are gone away. So I'm just like for the MVP tech stack. Are you sure we are using a good stack? So I want to come to a place where I actually understand what is happening, and if I'm familiar with the words. Built-in routing, API routes, cluster development, CSS, React for forms, React packing, database, Postgres, Postgres, email resend, data storage. Okay. So now there is one thing interesting. So personally, when I started building products, I still not use Postgres. Right. So my experience right now pretty much lies in MongoDB. Right. So it's just like what I learned initially when I was like hacking. So rather than basically going with things which So if it's your first time program, then maybe Postgres is a good choice. But sort of like if you have used something before, just use those things to build code initially, so that you're not entering territories which are completely new. But for the purpose, like because I have not used Postgres up till now, I'm going to sort of commit to Postgres and see basically where plot takes us. Okay. Right? Because I'm going to learn as if I've never like if I don't know anything about it, and how will I debug the problems? So for that, let's keep Postgres over here. So it had decided a tech stack. This is simpler to understand than the earlier stuff which it had come up with. So I'm just like I'm kind of happy with this. So it's okay. It's okay to not understand any like things which are here. It's not our problem for right now for activity building. I'm just gonna say let's. This is gonna be now the moment of magic, right? We're gonna just say let's implement phase one of the MVP in the product scope or MVP, right? So we have clearly defined what the product is. Like this document practically contains all the different features. So I'm trusting that Claude knows what the whole product would look like, and it is a decided tech stack based upon that. This document is going to be a central document with which we're going to build. So let's implement phase one of the MVP in product scope. And also, one thing I've noticed is it's good to give it a slight guidance. So, for example, so generally what I say is that keep front end and back end separate folders. For people who don't understand what front end and back end means, so front end is the UI and the web application or the mobile app part of the code. The back end is mostly the place where logic or any sort of like sort of calculation or analysis is happening and all the information is being stored. Right. So generally I tend to separate these two because it makes it easier for to reason what's happening where. So I'll press enter and let it play the game now. Right. So it's now giving instruction and I just blind press run command. I don't care about like what it is saying. Just keep pressing run command. The job now is to just let it play the game. CD front end, run command, and that's what I'm doing. We're just gonna have a coffee. I don't have a coffee. Where's my coffee? No coffee. No coffee. So it's doing its work. So it says okay to proceed. I just say yes. I don't know what I'm doing. Yes. That's the YOLO or vibe coding. I guess I should know it. But the thing is like so in life, like one of my friends said like one thing. I think it's just an Amazon philosophy, right? Like where in life you have two types of problems. One are two types of sort of problems. One are two-way doors, and one are one-way doors. When we are doing like vibe coding like this, everything is a two-way door, right? Like we can always revert. We can always throw this code. This code is not taking like we're not spending millions of dollars building this code. We're not spending hours building this code. All this code is just experimental, which you're figuring out. And slowly, as you learn, you start understanding the words, you start understanding what is happening. But initially, you don't need to worry. Just keep pressing yes. It's all right. Your computer is not going to burn. So press yes, let the code come out, and later we'll figure out what the hell happened. Would you like to use TurboPad? I have no idea what I'm pressing. I'll just say whatever is the default option.
Wow.
Huh?
That doesn't scare you at all.
It scares me. See, like as I was saying in the previous part of the podcast, like I had built a product where all the users got access to all of the used data, right? Like that's wrong.
Mhm.
So now that I've seen that can happen, I'm very careful whether that can happen, right? But see, all those kind of problems you'll only know once you make some mistakes.
Okay.
You're not going to know them. So if you're a beginner developer, even if you're a beginner developer, you just went to sort of like IIT or Berkeley, right? Like on day zero, you're not going to know what problems computers can generate, right? In the same way, like you're not going to suddenly know all the different things where this can fail and what can happen. The only way to know is just let trust this, see what generates, see where problems come up, learn from it, and sort of like learn very fast, right? Like you just need to like we can't spend like hours and hours googling stuff. Like my basic philosophy in life is unless something breaks,
Yes.
don't try to fix, right? So when things start breaking, I'll start going and looking into it, fixing it. See, I'm not building a banking app right now.
Yes.
So we're not too worried. Even if it's a skincare app right now, I'm not building it for public user. I'm building it for actually demonstrating like and pick one product.
And then you can look at each use
And then
case.
exactly. Then we can sort of like go deep into each use case and figure out like where it can falter or what can happen.
Maybe one thing to think about it, like maybe you will end up with a software which has more bugs than anyone else. But
Yes.
that's fine, right?
Like see, if you're a small kid, if you're learning to walk, you will fall down.
Yes.
The thing is like not to be afraid, not afraid to fall. When a kid learns to walk, it's not having a guidebook as to how to walk, right? Like the idea is that it's just like do random stuff. Like the kid like tries different things, and it fails, and then over time it learns, figures out like what's the optimum path for movement. But rather than going to a college and learning computer science, now the game has slightly changed because you have a really smart average, like a really smart engineer, let's say who just finished uni, sitting with you. So you're going to learn from him or her. Right? Like, you just and let it do the, let me just press learn command. Okay. So it's doing a bunch of shit,
Yes.
fine. But as you build more and more products, you'll start realizing you'll get familiar with the words. Right? You'll get familiar with the words, you'll get familiar with what is happening on the screen. But in the first iteration, don't worry. Like because I want people to fail.
Yeah.
I want people to have bugs. I want people to struggle, right? Because only if you struggle, then only you'll ask the right questions. I must have. Then, like, see, like I started developing 3 months ago. Right? I feel fairly confident now that obviously I'm not as good as a person who's been coding for 10 years. I can never because I have more experience in figuring out what are the bottlenecks, where the problems can happen. But I think I'm getting better and better every day. The idea is to become better than your previous version, right? It's not about how do I become the best engineer. It's about how do I every day become better, like coder.
Okay, so you kind of like asked all these questions. Now, what is like your? How do you get to something which is worth doing? Like, let's just get to something.
Then it just do the thing. Like if you just keep doing stuff like it's now right now installing a bunch of package libraries, then we're not going to disturb it. It takes a bunch of time. Sometimes what I do is like I just leave it and sort of like go to the washroom, go for a walk. So there is a YOLO mode also where it can just like keep taking these decisions itself.
Okay.
Got it. So in a way, like you are saying, get started. Like a message for someone is like get started. Think about the problem you're gonna work on.
Exactly.
If you're -1, just like get started.
Start.
Get
Get started.
cursor and you
Don't fear the words. Don't fear it.
don't fear.
Don't fear. No fear. I think like the idea is no fear because I think there's a lot of jargon to understand.
Yeah.
Like it can be complex. It can for a person it can be like oh my god, like what am I getting into? What is an API? What is a backend? What is a front end? What is all these like crazy looking words? See, these things have been built over 30, 40 years of computer science engineers like hacking their brains together to build all this shit. You're not going to learn in 15 minutes.
Yes,
That's
you're
not
not gonna learn it like that. Yeah.
That's not going to happen. You're not becoming a computer science engineer who spent 4 years or 5 years
Yes.
to do a degree.
Yes.
The idea is not to become that person. The idea is how to figure out to build a product as fast as possible and how to have an independent lifestyle. So that's what we are getting to. Now, we'll make mistakes, but the idea is have that approach YOLO.
Okay.
Very cool. So, anything else that you want to share today, Rahul, with the audience about how people can kind of like take a leap on their dreams? How can people take a leap around their dreams? Anything else you want to share?
I feel like a lot of times, like even me in the past, with everything in life, I feel like we all have a lot of ideas. Like, hey, like I should do this, I should do why. But many times we just don't start, right? Like for example, for me personally, I used to be like 105 kgs at some point of time when like 4 years ago, right? Like I have been at that weight for like 4 or 5 years for some reason, and I knew like what I had to do: go to the gym, start running, right? Simple things. And I think like this notion of like just like wear your running shorts, go out, start running. It will be hard. It's going to be complex. Your mind is going to be like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. You just like keep going because, like for example, the first time I went for running, running for 2 minutes for me was a very hard thing. But across a period of 9 months, I was running 25 kilometers in one go. Right? So that's how our mind works. Like initially, something can be hard. These words can be unfamiliar. That's okay. You don't worry. You let yourself fail. Fail fast. I think thing is like you want to get going and you want to fail as fast as possible rather than thinking and avoiding failure in your head.
Okay.
Right?
So one question I have.
Yeah.
Let's say someone is vibe coding.
Yeah.
and they're asking Cursor the questions, and Cursor's repeatedly failed, and it's not doing what they want. How can they get out of that spiral?
I think, think of it as a human being, right? Imagine a new person in your company comes up and says, "Hey, I failed. I'm not able to figure this out." How would you? You're not just going to criticize that person. Hey, you are a stupid person. Why can't you fix this? We go and fix this, right? If you're truly in a mentorship spirit, you will ask them, "How did you do this? What was the logic behind this? Explain to me in simple words. What did you do?" Right? So when I'm stuck with problems in Cursor, what I end up doing to Cursor is rather than saying fix my problem, what I'll do is hey, explain me how did you come up with this? What's the logic behind this? What are the different codes, the parts in the code which correspond to this problem, and help me understand how the information is flowing across the code, right? So with that, I think Claude is really good at explaining things. So it'll break down it will go across the code and figure out what how the information is flowing, and will give me a whole logic, and then I can read the logic just like a person in English and say, okay, here is a flaw, or here is a problem, right? And then I can guide Claude to fix that problem by saying, hey, so you have a problem here.
Okay.
Very cool. It looks like it's going to continue processing, but I think this is a good way for anyone to get started. If you are one of those people who is been thinking about, hey, I want to build a billion-dollar company, I want to be very clear here. Billion-dollar companies are not built in one day.
Exactly.
Billion-dollar companies are built through resilience, through a lot of hard work over years. But as of now, if you are not a professional coder who has never worked on coding, there's a billion-dollar opportunity right now that comes to you through these tools like Cursor, where you can basically go deep dive into it, learn how to code, and get that $1 billion out for yourself.
Exactly.
And you are making that happen for yourself.
And I think Cursor is a beautiful product, right? It's you can build marketing software, you can build sales software, HR software, any kind of software. So there are hundreds of billions of dollars sitting inside Cursor. And all you do is ask the right question. If you can ask the right question, and if you can work with a person with a beginner mindset, that I don't know anything, I'm happy to work with it. Over time, you can learn. So even think about this, right? Even if somebody's an engineer, has been 10 years, right? What is stopping you to build that experience? What is stopping you? You have the best teacher over here. You have the best engineer over here. I'll not say the best, but a good enough.
Yes.
Right? In life, you don't need the best of everything. You just need good enough things.
Yes.
Right? The mindset has to change from that I want the best. Nothing I feel okay, if you can hire the best engineer, go ahead. And if it's resource constraint, which every founder is in this world, you basically think that what do I have and how can I make the best use of it? So yeah, I think it's done the whole code. So you can see we have a bunch of files over here in the backend and we have a bunch of files in the front end. Right? Now it's saying, and it's written a README. README generally is written by especially when we sort of give the agent the work, it's written to help us understand how to start running this code. Right? So it has given a bunch of instructions for us to start running this. So it's saying it has done a bunch of stuff. So now we need to sort of set a front end and set a back end. Now, the one thing to notice is most of the products are basically hosted on internet somewhere on a website. But initially, when you're developing something, you want to host it just on a local machine. So you basically have everything running on your computer. So that's what localhost is, if you get confused.
So now you can test it out.
Now I can test it out and see what has happened. See, on 99.99%, this is going to fail.
Okay.
Right? So this is not going to work. Right? But we are now going to figure out what is
Failing.
That's the job. CD front end, the same instructions from the top, and npm install. Yep, it's already installed, no problems. So now we say, I don't know what this means for now. Okay, it's asked me to run this, but obviously there is no such file directory. I don't know what to do with this. So I'm just going to copy this, put this into my thing, say error. Right? That's it. And let's see what it says. And it helped me explain. I see the error. We need to create n blah. So it has now gone ahead and created the file. So fine, fantastic. So you create this file. So you click over here. So it's a localhost. No need to understand this for now. Not a big deal.
Wow, Gee, we are really vibe coding.
Yeah.
We are not understanding anything. We are just like, let's see what the result comes out to be.
See, the
This is
idea
very
is
exciting.
the idea is you need to get a product out.
Yes.
The idea is not to become the best coder in the world.
No.
Nobody's running a coding championship over it, right? Like we are here. Yes, the desire is there to become a good coder.
Yes.
Yes, the desire is there to build great products. To build a great product, you need to become a good coder.
Yes.
But the pathway to good coder is being a bad coder.
Yes, and I mean, everyone says like first build a bad product. Like your first product needs to be bad. Just like your first code can be bad. Like why do you need to have
Exactly.
the best code? You know?
Like you can't learn piano.
Yeah.
Suddenly become the best pianist in the world
Yeah.
by not like creating cacophony on the piano.
Yeah.
Right? Like you need to go ahead and just like do random shit, and then only one day you will become. So even if you want to create a great product, even if you're vibe coded, right now we don't understand much. It doesn't matter. Right now we are just building the confidence in the muscle.
Yeah.
That you can do something.
Yes.
Right? Slowly we'll start asking questions.
So let's see where are we at.
So we are here. So we did this. So this, let's run this. So see, like for example, now it has added a command. I can see what this command was trying to do. It's trying to copy the example environment file. Okay, I don't understand this. It's okay. But I'll run this command. I have some understanding building. Now it didn't give an error. Fine with this. NPM runtime.
So now the front end is running.
Yep. You see, the front end is having no problem running it, so it's working. So obviously, because the backend is not running, this might not show anything to us right now. But let's just check, right? Like localhost 3000. Is it going to give us anything? Oh,
Wow. So it has already given you the result.
It has given some basic front end right now.
Yes.
Right? So obviously, because our system, which has the logic and the database, is not connected yet, we need to figure that out, right?
I think to be honest, like I think this is what I was kind of looking at in just like helping people understand that now how many minutes it took us, like not even 5 minutes to be able to get to a UI. It could have, and especially like even local host, everything. I think it could have taken like
this is
hours for someone new.
I'm pretty sure like this, like in the old world, if you were talking about like 2 years ago before AI came about, this would have taken 2 to 3 weeks for an engineer to like, for even two people to code together to get all this stuff working. Now, I'm not saying that's great. We're living in a new world now.
Yes.
Like for a person who doesn't know stuff, this is a great way to start learning stuff, right? Like, and the way I think about it is like, let the problem happen, and we'll learn from the problems rather than
Learn on the go.
learn on the go.
Yeah.
Very different, obviously. Like if you're trying to become a doctor, you don't want to do that.
Yes.
Right.
But as a
If you're
coder,
becoming a surgeon. But as a coder, where you're not shipping the products live right now, right? So for example, for me also, right? Like for 3 months, I've been coding like this. So I will say that I've learned a lot, right, in these 3 months. But I've not stuck myself to just one product and try to ship it. I've built like 8 or 9 different products, trying out different things. And I think like doing that has helped my brain tinker. And as I see things happening around me and as I get stuck in loops and problems, I've learned a lot by just doing that.
Okay.
My recommendation to anybody who's starting out is like just like take 2 or 3 months out, build a lot of products, a lot of problems. Just whatever problem comes up in your head, in the night just say, I'm gonna spend 2 hours just building a code. And just keep learning the words. Right? Slowly and slowly you will start seeing the patterns which are happening across your code bases. You're like, oh, this is what database means, this is what API means, this is how these things are working. Slowly, I think it's a slow process, but it's a sure short process of like 3 months.
Very cool. So
let's go and sort of also set up the backend. So we're gonna just go to. So we had the README here, right? It has given us instructions. This one, the CD backend, npm install. Let's see what happens. Then install. It did the work. npm. Let's see what this does. Need to install the following packages. Okay, yes. I'm pretty sure like this sounds very complicated. But don't worry. There's no point worrying. The only way to learn is to just see. Again, you have an error. Error? Let's just copy paste this error. It says Prisma schema loaded. So right now you might be like, oh, what does this word mean? Like, what does that word mean? Right, sure. We will learn all this stuff over time, but not the place for it right now. And keep, like, what I would suggest is keep reading. Like, for example, if you're solving an error, keep reading it. Okay. So let me stop.
This is very cool.
So your goal is to make the product work. The goal is not for now. And the thing is, like, that's not a permanent goal. Over time, your goals will change. Right now, you're just like trying to be like, okay, how can I use this to just build an MVP for myself, right? And then over time, and as you will see, like, I just start using the product, be like, oh, we don't want the product to work like this. We don't want the product to work like that. We'll start making changes from.
I mean, I think based on just like what we wanted to share, I feel like we were able to see the front end. Anyone can now download Cursor and get into vibe coding and not worry about like fear about whether they know coding or not. I think that's kind of the message here, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, to our audience, first of all, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully this helps you understand how you can actually build your billion-dollar company at some point. Now you don't need any kind of like separate expertise, or you can accumulate years of experience very quickly with the help of AI, Cursor, and tools that are available at your disposal. Just stay curious, keep learning, and you will be successful very soon. Thank you.